It is time for our midweek Bible study brought to you by Westbury Church of Christ. Westbury Church of Christ, where you get everything you need pertaining unto godliness and being a good citizen. Dave Yasko here. We're in Hebrews. We're studying the book of Hebrews chapter by chapter. We're in Hebrews chapter 12, one of my favorite chapters in the world, if even just for the first four verses. Which are magnificent, the first four verses. Let's read them. I'm reading this out of the New King James. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. For you have not yet resisted to bloodshed in your strivings against sin. Man, that's a lot going on in there, and especially I'm glad whoever wrote the book of Hebrews was a sports fan, because I'm a sports fan. I like watching and I like playing a lot of sports. I wasn't good at running the speed things in track. Okay, I can remember one time I wanted to see how good I was. It was an indoor track, so it was about 60 meters, and we had a kid that was still a dear friend to this day who was fast. I'm hearing you ask how fast he was. He was so fast he could turn off the light and be in bed before it got dark. That's how fast he was. He could catch rabbits. I mean, this kid was fast. And so I said to him, look, I would like to see if this truth behind the fact that a fast runner can make a slower runner run faster. So I said, I want you and I to run this 60 meters, and you run as fast as you can, and I'm just going to try to keep up with you. And we're going to coach down there and going to hit the stopwatch when I cross the finish line, and it'll tell me if that's true. And so, it was on your mark, get set, go. And man, this guy was blazing. He was going so fast. By the time we hit 60 meters, he had a good 15 meters on me. And so I crossed the finish line and caught my breath and headed up to the coach and said, okay, what was my time? And he said to me, I was so excited about that other guy that I stopped the watch when he crossed the line, not when you did. I don't know. But look at what his time was. Now, that didn't help me out real well, but it did make me decide that whatever it took to run the fast, I couldn't do it. And so whereas I admire our Leroy Burrells and Mike Marshes and Carl Lewis's and Cameron Burrells now who can tear it up on the speed events in track, I was not one of them. Now, let me tell you one I did enjoy. That didn't say I was any good at it. Let's just say that I enjoyed it, and it was cross country. Because you got out and you got to see things, and you didn't have to stay in the stadium and run around the oval true story. I got beat one time by a guy wearing cowboy boots, and I had on running shoes. That's embarrassing to admit, and yet it's true, and yet it happened. Now you sit and watch some of these distance runners. Let me mea culpa here. There are major track events across the world every year. There are games in Switzerland where 50, 60, 70,000 people will crowd into the stadium back when we could do that. May we be able to do that again soon. There's a set of games up in Norway where 50, 60, 70,000 people gather into the stands. There's a track meet in London that is a sellout, and all of the top athletes in the world go there. Japan, the same way. All of those places are mad about track and field. They're crazy about it. They love it. Kind of like cricket in Pakistan and things. So so our guys go over there and they compete, and there are incentives if they win, and there are incentives if they set a world record, and all that kind of stuff. The eyes of the world really don't watch that much. The eyes of the world watch the Olympic Games. We got them coming up this summer. And you ask those runners, and they will tell you they would trade 10 first place finishes in Norway for one gold medal in the Olympics. because the eyes of the world are on the Olympic events, and the Olympic events are centered. Summer Olympic events are centered around track and field. Now, I like to pay attention to the distances. I love watching the short races, but boom, they're over. And watching something like the mile, the 1,500 meters, or the marathon, or the cross country. We've got folks here at Westbury who run marathons, and so there are different styles of running and distance. Some like to go right out from the very beginning and lead and dominate the whole race, and some kind of like to stick back in the back and peek their heads around and make a kick for in the last 400 meters to get a big finish in that. Now, let me just tell you about my career as a cross-country track guy, okay? I never finished in the top three, all right? I didn't. I just wasn't good. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't good in that. On the other hand, in my opinion, I never lost. I may have run out of track. I may have run out of time. But in my mind, if that race could have gone on a little bit longer, I'd have beaten him. And so sports that Paul wrote back then, or whoever wrote the book of Hebrews back then, it took a major part of their time, just like sports does today. It dominates their thoughts. We're wondering what the Texans are going to do without Deshaun, and whether or not the Astros can get everybody healthy enough to play. And if the starting pitching isn't doing good, will the bullpen hold them up? And if the bullpen can't hold them up, will the hitters be able to start hitting? And who isn't doing the job and who is doing the job? And the Rockets, just forget about the Rockets. They're a team in trouble with that. The Dynamo and the Dash, they're sort of doing okay and holding their own, but people like that. People look at it. Now, in the Greek world, every young man was enrolled very early in the gymnasium and was expected to learn some basics: running, boxing, wrestling, swimming. Those were the four basics that every Greek boy was expected to master. There was also some emphasis placed on rowing and weightlifting, with the occasional ball game thrown in there. And here we have in Hebrews chapter 12, the writer to the Hebrews, and he is taking up on this theme. He's taking up on this theme of running. We are to run with endurance the race that is set before us. So tonight, let's just take a look at some famous runners, and then we're going to look at some winners, and then we're going to close it out. Now, some famous runners. In the New Testament, three people are kind of pulled off to the side as being famous runners. The first in that list is John the Baptist. And it was Paul who told us about him. In Acts chapter 13, Paul tells us that John fulfilled his course. Okay? Now that fulfilled his course literally means he finished running the race. That God gave John the Baptist a very special track to run on, and he finished God's race doing what God wanted him to do. Now, to the unbeliever, John may have been a failure, because John didn't have very good success in convincing those folks who were high up in the Jewish faith that Jesus was the one to come. John the Baptist might have considered himself a failure as he was in Herod's prison and sent word to Jesus a day or two before he was put to death. Are you really who you say you are? And Jesus sent back those famous words, "Go tell John that I am he who was sent." And so Jesus made it clear that John ran the race and won the race. Paul is the second famous runner, and he uses the image of the race to describe his own ministry. Acts chapter 20-24 says that his greatest desire was to finish the race with joy. And he accomplished this. He finished his race with joy and victory to the glory of God. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 through 8, if you want to go look that up. However, the greatest runner, unquestionably, was Jesus Christ. Because according to Hebrews 12, he lay aside everything to run the race to the glory of God. All of the stuff that weighs you down, he cast it aside. Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Now, Jesus could only reach his goal of winning the race by dying on a cross. So let me just tell you right off the bat, the Lord's race was not an easy race. It was a difficult race. But like any good runner, with his eye on the goal, he steadfastly set his face, Luke chapter 9, verse 51, and would not be detoured. All right, so there are three runners that are singled out in the New Testament that we are to pay attention to. Now, I want to take a minute and talk about what it takes to win the race. And I was talking to a man who coaches baseball, and he said, I coach champions. And I thought it was admirable, in his record and all of that all the parents want their kids on his team because they win ball games. And here's what folks who win regularly tell you. Very few people win by accident. That winning comes about by hard work, which means long hours of practice, and a lifestyle of pretty serious discipline. And Paul says, I want to give you some essentials for winning the Christian race. And let's just look at them. Number one, they are the fact that winners enjoy the game. They enjoy it. Now, I didn't say they enjoy all the hard work that goes into the game. I didn't say they like losing. But the thrill of the game is in their blood, and nothing's going to keep them away. I mean, the joyful runner has already won the race on the inside. He may have run out of track. She may have run out of track, but she didn't lose the race. Andy Roddick, great tennis player, said that he has a burning desire to win every game each time he steps on the court. Here's why. If we decide early on that we're going to lose, we're going to lose. But by the way, it's worth noting that the word amateur comes from a Latin word, amator, that literally means a lover. Spanish is amador, is a lover, amor, the heart. That the amateur athlete participates in the sport because he loves it. In England, back in the 1800s, there was an amateur soccer team called the Corinthians. And their idea was they wanted to have the spirit of the Corinthians. When the Corinthians were known for their generosity, and they wanted to, that's the spirit they wanted to embody. And they went over to Brazil to play a series of what they call friendlies, amistosos if you're in Spanish, games that don't really count anything. They're not in any league. You just play for the fun of it. Occasionally the United States and Honduras plays up here at NRG, and there's nothing. It's just playing so that everybody can watch a game of soccer, watch a big international game of soccer, and the attitude of the English side Corinthians inspired the Brazilians so much that they named a team that still plays in the Brazilian top division today, the Corinthians. That's how impressed they were with their spirit. Most professional athletes, the love of the game is what keeps them going. All right, number two, it takes more than love or getting psyched up to win the race. It demands discipline. We get the word disciple from discipline. And so therefore, to be a true disciple of God, we've got to discipline our lives. Paul says to buffet your body, not buffet your body, buffet your body. And he cautions Timothy. He says, I don't want you to have anything to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Rather, I want you to train yourself to be godly. He says physical training's got some value in it. But godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Now that word train, I want you to train to do something, where you go into training and stuff. It's the same Greek word that they get gymnasium from. And Paul was contrasting spiritual exercise with physical training. And he points out that spiritual discipline pays dividends in this life and the life to come. Physical discipline just pays dividends in this life. Samson. Let's go back into the Old Testament and Samson. Samson is a great believer, a great example of a believer who was undisciplined in his life. Instead of keeping his body, which he had amazing talents and skills and was strong and all that, instead of keeping his body under control, he treated his body as a sieve. And anything he could get into it, he would. And the consequences of Samson's life were tragic because his freedom only increased his bondage. And yet he made it into the Hall of Fame in the last chapter, Hebrews 11, by his ultimate sacrifice at the end. And then third, winners obey the rules of the game. Ouch, this is a sticky subject, isn't it, right now, with our Astros World Championship kind of tainted because they cheated. You may say, well, it didn't mean anything. It did mean something. No, it wasn't fair and square. You know, and who knew about it on what level? I don't know. I just know that it gives me a bad taste in my mouth because Paul says to Timothy, look, anybody who competes in the athletics is not crowned unless they keep the rules. 2 Timothy 2, chapter 5, New King James Version. Now, the Greeks not only had rules for the game, but they also had rules for the contestants as they trained for the game. And if the contestant was found to have cheated in training, they were disqualified. So when Paul wrote to Timothy, I have kept the faith, he meant I've obeyed the rules. As he ministered to other people, Paul's concern was to be faithful more than successful. I'm sure Paul could have baptized a whole lot of people if he was concerned with success, but he was concerned with faith. Now, fourth, winners stick to their calling and seek to do their calling well. All right, now if we challenge ourselves here at Westbury Church of Christ to be the very best that we can be and compete with ourselves, then we'll be ready to meet the challengers who try to take our Christianity away. Now, don't think for a minute that 2021 America, there aren't people trying to take your Christianity away. My dear friend Alan Isbell, who is an attorney and was told me about a case one time where a very high-profile attorney sued a school district because he got an organization to go along with him, and they sued a school district because they had a copy of the Ten Commandments on the cafeteria wall. And they had a painting of the Ten Commandments on the cafeteria wall. He was successful in court. And several teachers of the school joined him in his case. And after he was successful in the court, and they decided to all gather up at the school and have a congratulatory lunch on winning this. By the way, the Ten Commandments came down off the wall. And anyway, while he was at lunch, somebody stole his briefcase. And the lawyer got really hot under the collar and complained to the superintendent that somebody ought to put some warning somewhere about taking what isn't yours. And the superintendent looked at him and said, "Oh, we had one. It said up there, 'Thou shalt not steal.'" And so in order to win this big battle, he lost a little bit of integrity in what he was doing. And so we will meet that. Now, Paul in Philippians chapter 3 said, "This one thing I do." All right, so the secret to being able to stick to your calling and do it well is to focus on one thing, not dabble in 40 things. I'm going to make up a disease that I believe we in the United States of America and in Houston, Texas, are afflicted with, and it's called fragmentosis. We are fragmented in so many different ways. We've got so many irons in the fire that fire is in danger of going out. And so Paul shows diligence and concentration and this one thing I do, not this 40 things I dabble in. Number 5, the 5th thing to do to be a winner is you got to forget the mistakes of the past. There's your recipe right there. You cannot run forwards if you are looking backwards. Any runner will tell you that when they take their eye off the goal, they're in danger of losing their direction and their motivation. Why don't you just Google sometime runners who celebrated too soon? And you'll see 15, 20 minutes worth of highlights where some guy or some lady is running around the track and they start and they're in first place and they start celebrating. They got the hands up and they're pumping up the crowd, and they let their foot off the gas pedal, and zoom, somebody runs past them and claims their prize. So, you can't let yourself be distracted, Paul is saying here, or the writer, is saying here. You can't look back on your failures and your successes. All right, each race is unique and demands the very best we have. And then number 6, winners think about the goal and the prize. A very great football coach one time said, winning isn't everything, but wanting to win is the only thing. So the dedicated track star wants to win and will do their best to achieve that victory. And when they lose, they're going to learn from that loss. And they're going to get ready to win the next time out. This is why Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9:24, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? So run in such a way that you may obtain it. Now, in the Olympic Games, only a few can be the winners. For every 10 people that run in the heats, only 3 can advance. And once you get to the final, of those that are running the final, only 1 can win. That's the Olympic Games. The Christian race, we can all win. It's not graded on the curve. It's not graded on the concept of only one's going to get in. And so the writer goes on and makes another contrast between the Olympic Games of the day and the race of faith. They said, when you won the Olympic Games, the writer said, when you won the Olympic Games, you got a wreath that was placed on top of your head that faded and died in time. 1 Corinthians 9:25 tells me that we receive a crown of glory that will never fade. And can I just tell you so much right now that Dean and I flew to Georgia Wednesday morning. You're listening to this Wednesday night. We're in Georgia. We're going to celebrate my father getting his crown that will not fade. I want one of those crowns. And then finally, number 7, winners are all team players. Paul didn't try to win it by himself. Paul had a bunch of co-runners. See, there I go again. The writer of the book of Hebrews had a bunch of co-runners that labored with him in the gospel. Barnabas and Mark and Silas and Timothy and Priscilla and Aquila and Ephesus, and Epaphras and Titus and Timothy. These were trusted allies who could leave literally at a moment's notice. So the successful team, whether it's the basketball team that won a state championship this year at Westbury Christian, or a youth group, or a dedicated bunch of teachers, they work well together. Can I tell you the secret of why we have very little turnover in the ministry staff at Westbury Church of Christ? Let me tell you the secret, okay? We love each other. I don't mean we tolerate each other. I don't mean we like each other. I mean we love each other. Ann and Shelvia and Joyce and Josh and Colin and Luis, I love them like they are my own family. The church that loves each other to that degree, we can't be stopped. There's no place for a glory hound on a team. There's no place for somebody that has to make all the points and take all the credit. We've got to be careful with this. We have seen, sadly, churches that have split and works that have been stopped and souls that have been lost because people thought more of themselves than they did the church. You see, the winner thinks about the whole team, not just themselves. They know how to work for the good of all of the teammates. It's tragic when somebody's true character is shown and they put themselves before the team. Now, the interesting thing about the Christian team is that we get to encourage each other even after we've died and gone to heaven. Well, we can warm people's lives by our witness that we made on this earth, not just watching from heaven, but encouraging others from heaven. It starts out surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Some versions say crowd of witnesses. That means that the people who ran, that means that the Calvin Rogers and the Bill Sellers, that means that the Bill Yaskos, that means that those folks, the Nancy Hollies, that means the Linda Thatchers, that means the Kenneth Fletchers, that means those who worked and worked hard are standing in heaven, not sitting, standing in heaven, cheering you and I on as we run the race. Now, we can't be watchers on earth. We just can't. It's a whole lot easier to be a watcher and watch others work and then comment on that. Yeah, you go to any professional sporting event and see what I mean. There are 1,000 armchair coaches that can tell every team what they did and what they did do right and what they didn't do right. And there's Monday morning quarterbacks and all this kind of stuff. And you realize that it's a whole lot easier to watch until it's time to get the prize for winning. Then we wish we could go out there and get out of the stands and join in the team. Well, that may not be possible with the Astros and with the Rockets and with the Texans and with the Dynamo and with the Dash. That may not be possible with those guys, but it is possible for those of us who are Christians. It isn't too late to start running. So run with endurance the race that is set before us. When can I quit? When you have shed blood and you're striving against sin. When you have been hung on a cross, rejected by both God and man. When you have been scourged and had vile things been spit on. When you have been cursed and your name become a byword for bad language. Then you can quit. Then you can give up. Winston Churchill was speaking at the school that he attended when he was a young man. And this was during World War II, when nobody really knew how that battle was going to end, the Battle of Britain. Nazi planes were coming over and laying their payloads of bombs on the major cities, and blockouts were going on, and people were given assigned places. I've talked to people who lived through that said after a while it numbed them watching people die. And so this wasn't a time when everything was certain, everything was going to go well. But he stood up in front of this crowd to try to encourage them, and in what was probably the shortest speech in Winston Churchill's career, just simply said, never give up. He didn't do it like that. He started low and slow. Never, never, never. Until finally at the top of his voice, he screamed out, never give up. I'm not going to give up till I hear, well done, good and faithful servant. You don't give up until you hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And then we can enjoy the fruits of heaven. Dear God, I come to you right now asking you to give us the strength so that we not quit, so that we never give up, so that we run with endurance the race that is set before us, knowing that we are being urged on by that group of folks that have gone on before us, that are watching us. Isaiah Jackson, Father, as he did the fight in Sudan where it was hard, being chased by people that were trying to kill him, but he could not be quiet. And now he stands among those in heaven and cheers for us down here on this earth. And since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, dare we give up? No. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.